Is the fifth webinar that Label None has hosted, and today's session is one that I am especially proud of, as it's a combination of firsts. It's the first webinar that's being hosted in Australia, and it's the first webinar to involve one of our partners in Foxton Creative. So before I pass over to Joe, who's representing Foxton today, I'm just going to give a quick introduction about myself. I'm Rob Munro. I'm here heading up Label None in Australia. So as a white label marketing agency, we partner with other innovative agencies, and we provide performance marketing services on a scalable basis. What we do is we help marketing agency partners with providing resources around data analytics, SEO, search engine advertising, and paid social. Now, just to hand over to Joe.
My name is Joe Foxton. I am founder of Foxton Creative. We are a brand agency based here in Australia, but with global reach. We love helping companies to elevate their brand and their online presence. So with that, I think I'm going to launch into my presentation. Who is Gen Z? So in order to define that, we're going to have to make some generalizations. Generalizations are by definition not accurate. Painting massive swathes of the population with one brush can be problematic. But as professionals who are trusted to help companies to be the best version of themselves, we need to seek a deeper understanding of our audience. So we turn to statistics. We need to listen to young people, pay attention to the data with no judgments. But we need to avoid being this guy, because that's super chuggy. What does this word chuggy mean? So chuggy is a Gen Z slang for out of style, for something or someone who is naive about trends and is yesterday's news, which means it's totally chuggy for me to be using the word chuggy. So trying to speak their language is a tricky business. It's much better to try to be your authentic self. This is what Gen Z really values. So Gen Z, they're not a homogenous blob. They are fiercely individualistic. They are not only seeking to map a new path for themselves, but for their generation. Which leads me to the rallying cry of this generation, was quoted by Gen Z LGBTQIA icon RuPaul. It's your life's work to shine. You were not born to fit in, you were born to stand out. The Gen Z want to create their own world and set their own agenda, not the one that they've been handed. They're the largest and most diverse generation. Half of them are minorities, which is a lot more than millennials. And they're the smartest and best educated generation. They've come of age in the shadow of climate doom, of pandemic lockdowns, fears of global collapse. The future is super unsettling, so they look to the past. So cue the prevailing nostalgia trends, particularly nostalgia for the 90s. So the 90s was when my generation, Gen X, came of age. And it really tickles me to see kids wearing like a stepped up version of what we were wearing back in the 90s. The design zeitgeist for Gen Z is all about 90s nostalgia, which is fun, subversive, sometimes brutalist, sometimes kind of anti-design, all about breaking established design rules and making things fun. There's a lot of focus on collaging, as you can see in these flyers from the Good Room and Astral Weeks. But why is there a focus on the 90s? Why did Gen Z, why are they inspired by the 90s? So coming out of the 80s, there was a promise of a bright, endless, technology-enhanced future underpinned by unlimited resources and unlimited Pepsi refills. But in the 90s, the false promise of the 80s began to hit. The negatives of consumer culture and institutional bigotry really began to hit home. So as Gen X, we didn't like the way things were. We were angry and we wanted to push back through our art, through our culture, through our creations. So like Gen X, Gen Z in many ways are pushing back against the troubled world that they've been handed. The result is that, like Gen X, Gen Z are a combo of hippie and punk, although the empathetic kind of punk. They have a very enlightened view of psychology, having been born into an anxious and increasingly entropic world. They are empathetic, they are sensitive, they are fiercely defensive of those who are discriminated against. And they are also fiercely principled and have well-tuned bullshit detectors from all of the screen hours of being marketed to. They are very aware of greenwashing, the sad state of politics and world affairs, a toxic corporate culture, and endless growth and work till you drop vibes. So Google have done a brilliant job of understanding Gen Z with their Think with Google site, and I've drawn out some of the key points that they've made. So born into mobile and internet, Gen Z are very aware of their dependence on technology, meaning their online lives are both spontaneous and carefully crafted. They are very aware they are being marketed to, so they love brands that speak with authenticity. They are keen embracers of things that will improve their experience. And despite being very digitally inclined, many are very interested in authentic analog things, often in response to their over-digitized lives, and sometimes in response to their parents tracking and monitoring their behavior online. So wired headphones, offline digital things and formats, vinyl sales are growing dramatically, vinyl player sales are growing dramatically, and private social networks like Discord are growing too, very much like the private bulletin boards of the 90s. Another insight from Google, Gen Z is the most informed, evolved, and empathetic generation. They value information, stimulation, and connection, evident by their affinity for YouTube, Google, and Netflix. They have an enlightened definition of what it means to be cool. They feel something is cool if it's unique, impressive, interesting, amazing, or awesome. Sometimes something becomes cool when it brings joy or happiness, or is unique enough to stand out from everything. Musicians top the charts of cool celebrities. Young people like music that makes them feel something, whether old or new. You can see here some of the trends in how Gen Z like to dress. It's very non-gender specific, and it's not always about having the perfect body. About 26% of Gen Z said video games are their top entertainment activity. And 87% of those in the age bracket said that they play video games daily or weekly. So only 10% of Gen Z respondents said watching TV or movies was their favorite pastime. So some characteristics of Gen Z from GWI. One of the most surprising ones is they're money-driven and ambitious despite their hippie punk sentimentality. They love to travel despite not having much money in their pockets. They're prone to anxiety. They're known to set strong boundaries around their private lives and their work-life balance. They're avid gamers. They're nostalgic. And they use social media in a unique way, which we'll cover in a bit. So a few more bits of research from GWI. Yeah, again, maybe the most surprising thing is that they're very, money-driven and are enthusiastic travelers, even though they haven't got much money in their pockets. So a really important point, despite how parents might feel about screen time, Gen Z see the screen as an escape from anxiety and not the cause of it. And I think we all have to kind of get aligned with that perspective on screens. So how do they behave online? They spend about 3 or 4 hours a day on social media. They see social media as a connector integral to their daily lives. It goes well beyond entertainment. They look at social media differently than millennials. It's less like a highlight reel and more of a stream of consciousness. They are turning to video-oriented social media like YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Snapchat, and Instagram. They see Facebook and Twitter, or X, as their parent social networks. You can also see here that TikTok is the fastest growing platform, with some pandemic faves like Twitch losing a bit of steam. So it's really all about short form video for Gen Z. Some stats from Google. Almost all Gen Z use YouTube. They love watching videos together. It's one of their favorite things to do with friends. It makes them feel more connected to each other. They lean on video for learning and information. Most of them say YouTube is how they acquire new knowledge. Some more stats from Google that are driven by Gen Z. So 33% of shoppers say they have purchased products they discovered on YouTube. Watch time for videos has increased about 270% in the last 12 months. And importantly, watch time has grown massively for content that connects with users' interests. So in short, Gen Z uses YouTube to take a break from the stresses of being a teenager. So how do they find stuff online? How do they search for stuff? So interestingly, TikTok has overtaken Google as the primary search engine for Gen Z. So they still use Google, but TikTok is leading and is trending towards becoming more of a dominant place where they search for things. So think about any questions that you normally ask Google. Gen Z are asking TikTok. So the reason they're doing this is if you watch the videos on TikTok, you'll notice some kind of stylistic trends. It's all about information density. It's a combo of voices, visuals, and text moving quickly so that it doesn't matter what your learning style is, you can kind of pick things up. And although spoken quickly, the voices are crooned, like almost whispered into the microphone to provide a calming tone. Even though it's being spoken quite quickly, it's often spoken very quietly to offset the speed of the information. So Gen Z want information fast. They expect it to be delivered efficiently without missing key points. But why is TikTok their choice of platform? So why is TikTok so beloved? According to Make Use Of, it's simply because it's creative, fun, funny, easy, and immediate. The algorithm is great at bringing forward the videos you want. Its content is provided by common folk, for common folk. It's user-friendly, it gives instant access to latest trends and deep info about whatever you are interested in. Most importantly, it's entertaining. You can find something entertaining to fill all those small gaps in your day. So how is TikTok perceived differently than Google and YouTube? So according to YPulse, it's essentially that TikTok is a place where you see more memes, viral content, and what's happening in the world right now. It's all about immediacy. YouTube is much more about influencers and long tail content. So Gen Z are very picky about the influencers they follow. According to Edelman, they want to see real people with real lives. And that's something that's impossibly hard to fake. It's a hard thing for marketers to concoct. And the truth is, though, that many of these real people that they love are actually stone cold professionals at hitting the right tone verbally and visually for Gen Z. So that authenticity recipe is something that we all have to kind of learn from and try to deliver. An interesting thing to note about Gen Z is this. So while they feel that self-expression and individual identity are super important for happy life, they actually don't like posting that much. Posting can kind of be risky. You're under a lot of pressure to deliver entertaining content, and your post is under a big microscope, as well as being a permanent record in many cases. So this has led to the re-emergence of micro-communities, which is again something that was popular back in the 90s. So this is driven, this micro-community trend is driven by Discord. It's a place where kids can escape from public view and escape their parents' monitoring. Actually, my nephews and nieces have their own Discord server to chat with each other, and I think that's really cool. So that's opened up a bit of a new challenge for marketers, because now we have to think about becoming community managers and how do we tap into these private communities. They also love podcasts, with the vast majority listening on a weekly basis. They also love to shop, but very much on their phones. And this is partly driven to the collapse of malls in the US. So they're a generation of mobile shoppers. They have very high expectations of nice modern user experience that considers their visual likes. They don't want their parents' brands. They want brands that care deeply about their values. This has become the most critical deciding factor in which brands they'll support. So like I said earlier, they're cash poor and love to buy secondhand clothes. They love to find unique bits of clothing that really make them stand out. And it's just a closing thought before I hand back to Robert. Gen Z really rely on brands to shape their world. They have high hopes for the brands they choose. They expect big things. They want you to stand out. They want to stand out, not blend in. It's cool to be you. And this is equally true for brands they admire. And this is something you should consider as you think about how to position your brand for this audience. All right, back to you, Robert.
Cool, thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, I can see having 13 Gen Z nieces and nephews really pays off. So yeah, okay, so let's jump into how you can adapt SEO strategies to target, engage, and convert Gen Z. So we're going to break this down into 3 main areas and provide examples of how to optimize each area accordingly. So we're going to be looking at keyword and content research. We're going to look at SERPs, or search engine results pages, and also on-page optimization as well. So keyword research is typically the first port of call for building an SEO strategy and part of your kind of normal SEO roadmap. Researching keywords helps us understand important considerations for developing our strategy, for things like overall relevance of keywords, the intent of users when they're searching for those keywords, the level of search demand, and what competitors also feature for that keyword as well. Now, with an ever-increasing number of SEO tools available in the market, each with different strengths and weaknesses, it's important to adapt our research for this particular demographic, and it's important to change our approach accordingly. So Gen Z users will typically spend more time on social media than other demographic groups, and it's this behavior that makes it really important to change how we go about doing our research. So if we were to jump over to TikTok, which, as we know, is a highly popular platform for Gen Z. Now, TikTok pushes video content to its users through their feeds based upon user preferences and behavioral patterns. Therefore, it's common for users to not necessarily need to search for new content. That being said, the search bar in TikTok, much like conventional search engines, provides a basis for narrowing in on broader terms and also identifying more long-tail keywords. But before we continue, there are some important considerations to take into account before you start your research. For example, it's key that you have an understanding of a good understanding of your industry and the main areas that users will seek content for, so you can begin your research and kick off. So, for example, is it a consumer brand that provides tangible products that has reviews, for example? Or is it a B2B service that touches on a particular pain point? Either way, there will be a basis from where you would want to start your content research. Now, once you know where to start, it's then a case of conducting this research to see what video content has been produced, and also to see what level of engagement those videos has received in terms of views and interactions, and then also to see what competitors, if any, are doing in this space as well. So another method on TikTok is, another keyword research method on TikTok is to look at the discovery section. So this is part of the app that provides trending hashtags and content. And that can also give you an insight into what's popular within certain areas as well. And then TikTok also has recently released a keyword insights tool into their creative center. The creative center is very much a work in progress product, I'd say. So the results within that are very mixed and actually quite limited from experience. So I would say the tool is not to be used as a basis for kind of building your strategy, your content strategy and your SEO strategy, but it's certainly worth referring to. And then also another tool worth mentioning is ChatGPT. Now, although ChatGPT is powered by AI, it is still a large language model, which means that it will help you expand upon your core keywords. But ultimately, it's not going to provide you that real-time data that that TikTok will show you in terms of what's trending and what's popular. So it's useful for reference, but it's not necessarily, again, what you should base your research on. So once you have a good understanding from conducting your research within TikTok and within social media, it's then important to combine that with your conventional research that you would do through kind of like the normal tools. So one that we use typically at LabelNone is SEMrush. You can also search within Google directly. There's Keyword Planner as well if you want to use that. And then once you kind of have all of your data and your research mapped out, it's then a case of bringing it all together into a cohesive plan. So once you have your plan in place and you understand where the keyword, what the keywords are and where the search demand is, you can then begin to map out the different topics of content that relate to your product, your business. And then you can from there begin to figure out where the main areas of search are that you would want to target based on the different levels of the search funnel. So awareness, consideration, and conversion. Now, finally, it's important to remember there is crossover between social media and also search engines. So it's beneficial when you're conducting your research through conventional tools to do some real life checks and just to look at the search engine result pages actually within Google to see what content is appearing for those different keywords. So an example of this would be how-to content. So how-to content is very much about awareness and consideration. So top to middle of funnel. And this is a great opportunity for brands to really kind of weigh in with some example content of like how to apply a product or how to navigate a particular pain point. So again, that's really where video comes into play. Now, moving on to search engine result pages, although as we have already established, Gen Z does spend a lot of time on social media, when it comes to brand research, using a website is still very much part of their experience, part of their research experience. So that's why it's really important within the SERPs to make sure that the appearance of the brand is as engaging and authoritative as possible. So building authority as a brand, whether that be through rankings for keywords or essentially for the brand term itself. Establishing authority is essentially the cost of entry onto your website. And with this, it's important to establish yourself amongst your competitors when it comes to commercial or transactional intent keywords. With SERP optimization, what's really important is to check your metadata. Now, this may sound like one of the most basic SEO suggestions out there, but it really is one of the simplest things that can sometimes go wrong, and it does need to be considered as part of the user journey. So when you visit social media platforms and you are doing all of your content research, it's important to then think about, as I was mentioning earlier, your content plan. And then as you begin to create and publish your video content and push it out onto social, you can then link that back through to your website with your profile description on social and also from the posts themselves. And so what this will do is it will help build a feed of content and more presence on the search engine result pages around your brand. So when people are searching for your brand, they can see video content and they can see more social media content appearing within those search engine results pages. The other really important consideration on this particular point is metadata. So as we know, is commonly known, metadata is one of the most important ranking factors when it comes to SEO. So metadata in itself is important, but when you take metadata and put it into the context of targeting a particular demographic, it then becomes a completely different ballgame, because at that point you need to then think about how it's appealing and attracting to this particular market, being Gen Z. So when you're writing your meta descriptions, when you're writing your meta titles, it's really important to sell your brand and your products in a way that is approachable and is in a way that's understandable by this demographic. So instead of using just kind of factual descriptions of like USPs or features of your product, for example, think about how you can sell yourself using these features of a meta title, meta description. So a very common native SEO tool to use on websites is Yoast. So Yoast has template functionality where you can create en masse standardized meta descriptions and meta titles. So it's tools like these which do help when it comes to scale, but when you are bringing that back and narrowing down into a particular demographic, again, such as Gen Z, it's important to then go through your website and understand where's that template being used, which content and pages on your website are targeting that particular demographic, and then ultimately, is your metadata structured and written in such a way that it is going to effectively engage with your audience in the SERP. So to move on to on-page optimization, there's a few points to be made here. So I'm going to cover content optimization as well as a few technical considerations as well. First of all, if you're going to get to the point of where you're planning and creating video content or just content in general to push out on social media, what's really beneficial is to then host that on your key landing pages on your website. Now, this can be done in the form of like a slider or a plugin or a widget that can dynamically pull in content onto the page. But when you add these items, these bits of content onto your page, and again, if you are using a plugin or if you are using a widget, that does tend to add to the responsiveness and the speed of your landing pages. So although for the user benefit of having that social media content on your page and having that kind of that tied up experience of having your social media content there in addition to your actual website content, it's important to have the consideration of page speed, because ultimately users across the board expect for websites to be fast loading in this day and age. So when it comes to using social media embeds or plugins, I would really encourage you to think carefully about what particular pages you want to use these plugins on, and then to make sure that when you are using these plugins, to only deploy the code for those plugins on the particular pages, and to not, for example, add them into like the header of the website or the footer, because by doing that, it will be loading on every single page when it doesn't necessarily need to. So be quite selective of when you are using these plugins. Another couple of considerations is if you're going to be hosting video content on your website, perhaps not through a plugin from social media, but if you want to host it natively, I would encourage you to consider using alternative ways of hosting that video. So an example would be to use Vimeo. So Vimeo tends to have faster response rates compared to YouTube, for example. So again, if you want to host the video content natively, consider using Vimeo instead of YouTube, and then again, only really deploying that content on the pages that you want to show it on. And then the final point on this is when it comes to website speed, another really important consideration is a content delivery network. So a content delivery network is essentially designed to provide consistent levels of speed and access to users further afield. So from experience, there are a lot of different providers who provide content delivery networks, but for me, Cloudflare is the most consistent and the best value for money when it comes to this type of technology. So yeah, that's just a very quick and cost-effective way of improving your site speed and making it consistent for a number of users in different areas in different countries. So yeah, those essentially are the main points when it comes to on-page optimization. So just to recap on those, we've got when it comes to social media embeds, to make sure that you're using them on your key landing pages and not to have them site-wide. If you're hosting video content natively on landing pages, to use the services of Vimeo instead of YouTube, or hosting them on your own server. And then also to look at using the technology of a content delivery network as well, just to try and get consistent site speeds as well. So we're going to move into the Q&A now. But before we do that, yeah, I just wanted to kind of finish off by saying that when it comes to SEO campaigns, just try to consider the user journey all the way from social media through to the search engine result pages, through to the landing pages on your website, and just kind of gear your website and the whole experience around delivering a fast and engaging experience. Now, when it comes to planning content, creating your content, there will be continuity between the different touch points. But as long as you stay true to the principles of, again, delivering a fast and engaging experience, you'll provide users with the content that they're looking for, and ultimately put your website in the best position to convert them. So I'm just going to open up the floor. Hi, Jay.
Hi there.
So could you provide some tips on effectively extracting valuable keywords and content ideas from this platform, especially considering the dynamic nature of content on sites like TikTok? Yeah, definitely. I think we kind of touched on this, but essentially, when there is kind of new content on TikTok, it does move into that discovery section if it is really trending. But what's important is for you to kind of take a bit of a longer view of these sorts of things. So yes, use TikTok and its autocomplete suggestions within the search to kind of, again, get an understanding of what people are searching, because that will it'll provide that insight over a longer period of time, and that can be brought into your keyword research and your content planning. But then if you're looking for content which is really, really popular, then that discovery section is really where you would be looking to get that information. Okay, so you mentioned the importance of page speed, particularly for Gen Z users. Are there any specific tools and techniques you recommend for optimizing page speed? So yeah, one example would be a content delivery network. I think that's definitely a tool that should be considered, pretty much for all websites. But I mean, outside of that, what's really important is to start your journey from understanding where you're at in order to know where you need to be. So use tools. There's a tool that's really useful called GT Metrics, and GT Metrics is essentially a site speed analysis tool. I'm fairly sure it's free to sign up and use as well. And what it does is it will analyze the site. You can choose where your geographical location is. So for example, if you're a brand that sells products abroad, or if you have an international audience, whatever it might be, then you can choose to spoof your location or choose your location. So yeah, you can check what the site speeds are like from other areas and other countries, which really helps, again, just understanding where you're at now, and then the tool will come back and give you specific recommendations for how to improve the optimization of your website and your landing page. Typically, they do tend to be based around the content that's on the page. So if they're perhaps video or imagery, which are quite large in file size, but there's generally also some kind of more technical SEO considerations as well. But again, it's a journey of kind of knowing where you are now to where you need to be. And just to repeat, the tool is GT Metrics that I referred to just then. So are there any specific tools or platforms recommend for tracking or analyzing the effectiveness of SEO targets? So when it comes to specifying to a particular audience, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a particular tool that is stronger or weaker at targeting that like demographic. But I would say a lot of the kind of the standard tools that we would use for website tracking and analysis would still apply. So yeah, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and then ultimately what you would want to be doing is pulling in your website data and your social media data into one true view. And so typically what we do is set up a Looker Studio dashboard, and the Looker Studio dashboard would then have these kind of top level metrics of perhaps like impressions, impressions through search, impressions through social, and more mid-tier or mid-funnel metrics as well. So more around engagement, and then bottom of the funnel, more around conversion. So ultimately, yeah, it's using tools that we're familiar with already. But again, I wouldn't necessarily say it's one particular tracking or analysis tool that we would use to target that audience or using that audience. So then we just got one more question. What are your thoughts on how Gen Z will harness AR for their search needs?
I have a thought on this. So, I mean, they're already beginning to use generative AI to answer some questions, but I think what the trends are showing is that it's all about video. And so until these popular generative AI platforms can deliver answers in video, I think TikTok and YouTube are going to remain the dominant places where Gen Z search for stuff and find information that they're looking for.
Yeah, well said. Okay, I think that was the last question. So yeah, I think we've overran just slightly. But yeah, I just want to finish off by thanking everyone for attending today. We'll be following up with the recordings to people who weren't able to make it. And if you want to connect with myself or with Joe on LinkedIn, yeah, we of course would love to discuss this more, this particular subject, or on my side, performance marketing in general, and then on Joe's side, yeah, creative projects. But yeah, I'll leave that to Joe to pick up.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really nice. It's been very revealing to do all this research. I had my own ideas about Gen Z and had done some research in the past for various client projects, but to really dive in and get intimate with this audience has been a joy. I'm actually really excited about the future and what this generation is going to bring forward. Thank you.
Great stuff. Well, thank you, everyone.